Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's topic of the week. I am Alex Bajo, and in front of me, I have Joshua Cheatham. Today, we are going to be discussing how cartels prevent development in Latin America and hurt diplomatic relations. We thought this was an interesting one because it's not talked about as much in the news, and cartels are a major problem in Latin America. They've been plaguing Latin America for a long time, and we're talking since the Cold War. And violence has been unbelievably rampant in Latin America, particularly in Mexico as well. Thousands and thousands die pretty much every single year because of the cartels. And cartels, particularly Mexican cartels, have dominated the U.S. drug market, bringing in about 150 billion annually to the illicit drug market in the United States. The cartels have so much power and can do this because they just corrupt just about anyone. If you're an officer, if you're a judge, if you're an elected official, you are most likely going to get corrupted by the cartel.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I figure $150 billion because that's triple the amount of Disney's revenue every year. So they definitely they hold a big stake within Latin America, and a lot of local governments, in fact, use the cartel to kind of funnel in their own money. Like they'll
Right.
give them a cut and tell them either you can use this for your state or
Quick
for
money.
yourself.
They just want quick money.
Yeah. The largest cartels within Latin America are called the Zetas, and then the largest one, the most known one, is Sinaloa. Sinaloa.
Sinaloa.
Sinaloa, Sinaloa. Yeah, I think it's Sinaloa. But they're the largest one. They're definitely the most dangerous. Um, they do have cartels do have rules. You know, most recently with the American, yeah, most recently in
In
quotes.
quotes.
Most recently with the Americans that died, they apologized because they obviously don't want the flag. They don't want the United States getting involved again.
Oh no, they can't afford that. They can't
No,
risk that.
so they do have some rules, but most of them are not very good. They kill and they fight with local gangs. Like you said, Mexico is the largest population of where cartels usually are stations and also where they funnel their money.
Right.
Biggest money laundering is cocaine. Cocaine is their biggest selling drug. There was a study that was just done not too long ago saying that this is the golden age of cocaine, where they are estimating over $2 trillion of cocaine being moved
Jesus.
worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah, they have enough
That
cocaine to feed every single person on this planet.
that is crazy.
Yeah,
And we're talking that cocaine goes to EU countries, Philippines,
China, United
anywhere.
States, wherever you want,
That is two
wherever you
trillion
want to go.
dollars of cocaine. That is mind blowing.
It is mind blowing.
Like that's countries' GDPs.
That is larger than the like countries behind like the top five countries. It's larger than everybody else
Yeah. Yeah,
on the
exactly.
list. They're
Right.
technically the sixth largest GDP in terms of if you were to do it as a country.
That's crazy.
Crazy, but yeah, their crime is obviously very rampant in Latin America. Underdevelopment, corruption, but the cartels they fuel a lot of this. One reason why Mexico is so they're building up a military to basically separate branch to just fight the cartel and becoming into this military state. So um, Central America has a problem. South America has done pretty well with it, but
They still have a
Colombia still
problem.
has it. Brazil still has it. Argentina still
They're
has
more
it.
like that's where the drugs
Are coming from.
are coming from.
Yeah,
They funnel north, and then Mexico is like the hub essentially
yeah,
on where they get sent out. I find it particularly interesting where going back to the whole government thing and them trying to militarize to stop the cartel. It's gotten so out of control that they coordinate with the cartel on what they can and can't do in certain areas instead of actively trying to stop them. So imagine going up to your enemy and saying, "Can you do that elsewhere?" Yeah. This is can you not do it here?
that's
Like
where it gets.
that's literally how powerful the cartel is, and they can do that because the cartel can do that because they have corrupted just about everybody, mostly everybody in the Mexican government. So there was a statement from U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham that says he wants to introduce an initiative to use U.S. military force to destroy drug labs and destroy cartel networks. Bold statement, and this was a pretty recent statement too. We're talking about maybe a week ago,
Oh, really?
but the president of Mexico stated that this would violate Mexico's independence and sovereignty.
Which is true.
It is true,
I
but
believe they should work together.
they have a true $2 trillion cocaine market going around the world,
Yeah,
and it's going to cause another drug problem if they don't stop this. So
they're already up
I
there.
don't understand how this is going to. Yes, it independence and sovereignty very important, but what about the lives of, like you said, they could coordinate something. They don't have to
Yeah,
just send in troops and just
Mexico really, really wants to prove that the president really wants to prove that he can do it on his own, which he can't. I mean, the cartel's so they're rooted there. Like they are everywhere. They encourage youth to join their programs. They basically get them off the streets and tell them, hey, this is a life you can have. You know, this is all the money you can have. And
and they
they're
don't have anything else to go to. Well, they're
there's
going.
nothing else.
There's nothing else to do there. They
Development is going to be a big part in solving the issue, not
right.
just military. Um, because they own police in many areas. They
Oh
own the
yeah.
governments in many areas. They, I mean, they own almost all of Colombia because that's all they do is just they get the coca leaf and then they make cocaine out of it
Hmm.
from Colombia. Brazil has a big problem with local gangs, but they also have a big problem with the cartel trying to take over those local areas to have another staging ground to move their product in Latin and South America. Central America, they already have that down. They've taken over Central America.
Right.
Interesting that the United States doesn't get involved because the southern border is where it funnels a lot of human trafficking, not drugs. Drugs mainly 92% of trafficking comes through airplanes over the border, which I found it is an interesting stat. The rest of the 8% actually also comes from Marine. So very rarely do you see the drugs coming over the border through Border Patrol. Um, in terms of on foot or by car, it's mostly through sea and by air. So the United States, that like having a plane over their airspace that is moving drugs. I mean, that's technically a
They do
national
it in private.
security threat.
That they do it in private jets. It's just
True.
fascinating, and that's
Yeah.
how they do it to get stuff to the EU as well,
Yeah.
which blew my mind. Where they just like it's crazy. It's over your. It's
It's a national security
yeah.
threat, and yet you can't you can't. Mexico's trying to say, "Oh, that's a violation of our sovereignty." Well, you're having people come, your people. Technically, they're your people coming to our country. We could technically declare war if we wanted to. We're not going to, obviously, because it's not a
Yeah.
reasonable threat, but we could. Um, so we need to do more. EU needs to
Absolutely.
do more as well.
Oh yeah, I was just about to get into the EU side of the problem. So yes, the U.S. drugs are found in the United States, but the EU is struggling also with cartels in Latin America because cartels and EU criminal networks are have been collaborating to traffic methamphetamine and cocaine from Latin America into the EU. There's also a growing fentanyl market in the EU as well, because the EU has discovered that they have fentanyl production facilities around Europe.
Yeah,
So, it going back to the whole private jet thing, that is absolutely true. They're using cellular thermal concrete in concealed shipments and using private jets to transport these drugs. And corrupt officials in both the public and private sector, both in the EU and in Latin American countries, serve as facilitators to traffic these narcotics. So, um, it's just there you
deeply.
go.
Yeah,
There you go. It's
it's so deeply ingrained into these networks because they make so much money from it. It's first off going to be really difficult to stop the local gangs and organized crime from taking in this cocaine because
correct.
they're making so much money, drugs in general. But then you got to stop the largest criminal organization in the world. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sinaloa
I think Sinaloa is one of the biggest,
is top five biggest organizations in the world, and so it's so incredibly difficult to fight them.
and they're
But
just so out there around the world. You don't know
yeah,
who's who.
you don't.
Who are these entrepreneurs that are corrupted?
Yeah,
Where are these networks? They're very secretive.
very difficult to
They're
crack.
very. It's impressive on how low key they are
Yeah.
around the world.
And
They're just like little cells,
that's why we need
just
global
waiting.
response, you know? Like that's why Europe needs to get
There.
involved, the United States needs to get involved, China needs to get involved because their their networks are so big. You get one, but there's
You get
thousands
one guy
more.
off the street, but yeah, exactly.
There's thousands more.
There's a
So
whole like underground lab somewhere in
yeah.
Europe that no one knows about.
So one thing I want to talk about is discuss what Latin American countries are trying to put policies out there in doing to prevent the cartels from becoming more powerful. This comes from a site called I think it's called the BorgenProject.org, where they try to help out with the programs. The first one that they do is creating social programs. So social programs like health services, roads, jobs, opportunities, wages are very important. Basically, development
Hmm.
to preventing people from joining cartels and prevent cartels from being in areas. Because if you develop, you can create a bigger police, you can create a bigger sentiment against them, yada yada yada. More people are going to want to have a job instead of going toward the cartels. Um, Another big one are after school programs for children to keep them off the streets. So doing like after school clubs, sports, arts, whatever it is that those students are interested to keep them off the streets from getting recruited.
Right.
The second thing that they're doing is waging war. Mexico and Colombia have been actively using military to combat the cartels. In Mexico, sometimes by any means necessary, meaning they're going to harm civilians if they have to destroy the cartels. This is an interesting one that I read along. Criminalizing drugs. Guatemala and Colombia have almost decriminalized all drugs, all forms of drugs, cocaine, amphetamines, heroin, basically so
Huh.
that these people who are seeking drugs can get them for cheaper, dwindling down the profits from the cartel. Now you're saying, okay, yes, but they can sell them more, but it dwindles their profits.
And you also it brings to the surface who is in. It's almost like if they do this in a way where it's a trap, where you now expose who's who, because they're gonna get greedy.
Yeah.
They want to sell their products out publicly. You'll find out who's who in the cartel. So I guess that makes sense, the decriminalization part, if they're going to actually do something about it when everyone surfaces.
Yeah. It's incredibly difficult to get people on drug charges, cartels on drug charges, because most drug charges in most countries are not like federal, unless you have like tons and tons of cocaine. You're not going to spend federal time.
Yeah.
So you need to get them on racketeering, money laundering, yada yada yada. But this this is an interesting one because decriminalizing, like you said, will kind of put them out in the open a little bit because they're going to see, oh well, maybe I can just sell it on the street. I don't have to go through a street guy. I can just do it myself. Maybe it'll catch them. Maybe it won't. I'm not sure if they'll be that stupid. But you never know. Sometimes we slip up. The last one that they discussed in this one is just helping the international community and helping. The United Nations has the Office of
Drugs and crime.
Drugs and Crime. Thank you.
UNODC.
Yeah, UNODC of Drugs and Crime, which has a lot of funding to help fight off cartels and drugs. But I was kind of going to pose a question. What are some other ways that we can try and fight the cartels?
Um, there's one thing that Latin America has, and it has a bunch of green energy resources the resources we need to build the green energy products. Now, China and the US both want to get their hands on it, while everything else, like cartels and stuff like that, is white noise to them. So what I was thinking is, I literally just thought about this right now, right? Because I'm gonna go and get into after what are the diplomatic consequences of it. But before I get into that, I just want to answer your question and saying you can help Latin America essentially collect these resources
Yeah.
that they need. This will create jobs, factories, mines, everything you need, and it would kind of force the cartels to stop and not risk. And the governments don't want to risk that possibility of economic prospects
Yeah.
if they kick out China and maybe get help from the United States. But they need to be like, how do I say this? Not fully isolated, but they just need to be like, okay, we have everything we need to be an economic contender. If we get rid of the drug problem here, we'll get rid of this global kind of feeling of mistrust, and I'll get into that
Yeah, absolutely.
just in a bit. And if we can get everything we need, everything that we have, and send it out to the world because the world needs it to develop these green products, excuse me, then this would kind of just force a better response from Latin American countries because now they need to like really step up and say we need to get rid of these cartels.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
because of our failed response, there are drugs pouring out everywhere. So I guess that's another way. I do like the idea of trying to sort of distract children and try to get them to do extracurricular activities. I think that's a fantastic way
Yeah,
of doing it. Educating children as well, keeping them in schools, having the best education possible. So, and that they also have chances to study abroad as well. So the farther
absolutely.
away
Yes.
they are from being in cartel basically driven areas, the farther away they spend from that, and the more time they spend learning in a different country, it would make them want to essentially move out and do something with their
Or
lives.
back and better their own country.
Or exactly,
Yeah.
or come back and better their own country.
Yeah.
So I think a mix of these two is a social response to help children and the youth,
Yeah.
and also a economic response as well to stop the cartel. I believe these are the two most effective ways to stop the cartel.
Yeah, those are definitely two good ways. The one thing I want to say before you get to your point is I would say my two biggest things are the first one is going to be using special forces. I know they're already used in general, but I think there needs to be a bigger response between not just U.S. special forces and NATO to try to get down and just cut down the networks on the big guys. Don't worry about the middleman. Get the big guys in each sector of where networks are being ran, drugs are being funneled to get to the kingpin. The next thing, there needs to be a coordinated response from Latin America itself. The countries need to get together. Central America,
Oh
Mexico,
yeah,
and South America. They should have a meeting with all leaders, or as many leaders as possible, on how to fight the cartel, how to work together, how to help development. Because
almost
development
like
is going to
a
be the biggest thing.
military pact,
Kind
almost.
of, but maybe more just like a mutual friendship because
Mhm.
there's still a lot of tensions down there between each other.
Because they all have the same problem.
They do, most of
It's
them
just
do, yeah,
they're uncoordinated.
yeah.
I
But
That's a fantastic way of
it's not
think of that.
and Brazil does it one way, Argentina does it their way, Mexico does it their way, Guatemala does it their way, Colombia does it their way. That's okay, but if you could all come together and recognize the issue and then work together to come up with different responses to different areas and different needs, use the resources they have. That's the biggest one. I don't think it necessarily matters a coordinated attack. I think just getting the resources needed from each other, from the United States, from the EU, combat it. And I think that can make a big difference because development is important and coordination is very, very important too.
I think in another final way we can do that is we need more international pressure to
Mhm.
to to put on these Latin American countries because of the feeling of diminishing trust between Latin American leaders and U.S. and EU leaders. So if there's a way where the international community can say, "Listen, you have X amount of time to solve this problem, otherwise there will be some sort of consequence, and we might have to step in on our own." They need this pressure because Latin American countries cannot afford to lose these ties with major economic powers.
Nope.
Yes, China might be like, "Hey, they're forcing you to solve your problem. We can quote unquote help you."
Yeah.
But as in our latest global developments episode, where we talked about how China's road initiative is failing,
Yeah.
Latin America might just step away and say, "Listen,
We already don't trust
yeah,
China.
they already don't trust China. The last thing they need is to lose trust from these other economic powers."
The United
Um,
States, yeah, for sure.
yep. A cool figure I found was that uh, every 1 minute, there's $1.5 million in trading being made between the US and Mexico. So,
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
would they cannot risk that.
No, they can't.
Mexico is the second biggest trading partner with the United States. They cannot risk that.
No, they can't.
And the EU also understands of the economic benefits of working with Latin America, and they're looking into new ways to strengthen trade relations with Latin American countries. I read a report called, it was from the SME United, which is a kind of like a committee organization research initiative thing in the EU, which they released a position paper last month actually, which calls for the EU wanting to develop new trade agreements between SMEs of Latin American countries, between Latin American countries and EU countries as well.
Yeah,
So they the reason being is the EU does not want to lose out from competition from growing influences from US and China to trade for things like raw materials like lithium and no, I cannot pronounce that, for green energy products. But cartels hinder that process because of the corruption within governments.
yeah.
Governments are unable to try to solve this cartel issue, and it's just like, will these SMEs in different countries take that risk and try to work with SMEs in these Latin American countries?
I don't know.
It, it's dangerous for both of them because what's not to say, okay, there's a for SME, for anyone that doesn't know, is a small medium enterprise, so like a
Yeah,
small medium business. What's not to say this business person could just be corrupted when they go down there. Now they have a new network to funnel drugs. So there is this feeling of mistrust, and it could spread like a contagion if Latin America doesn't do anything about it. And we need this international pressure to say, listen, these are the benefits we will provide for you if you solve this problem. If you
yeah.
do not, we cannot engage in this sort of activity.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my
The
my
EU
spiel.
is not known for getting involved in things outside of Europe,
Yep.
unfortunately, unless it has to deal with China. And so I think the one thing if the EU wants to expand itself, its influence, they need to first off, like I said, get involved in Asia, get involved in Africa, and the next step's Latin America. And so their response, and first off, adding trade agreements could increase development in Latin America and
Yep.
change the landscape for the cartels because there's more money going to good people and developing into creating jobs and economies and infrastructure. So that could be extremely important if they ignore the risks a little bit and trust the process of investing in those countries because they're not like it's not like it's impossible. I mean, look at Asia. They did it. We've done it before. That's what I don't get. We've
Right.
done it before, and why we ignore Africa and Latin America boggles my mind because we have solved the problem of corruption in these countries. Not completely solved the problem, but help them on the developing world.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We that Going back to the lack of mistrust thing. I want to say that we need we need more of these Latin American countries as well, these leaders to also ask for help, essentially. Like
yes.
they need to be out there. They need to be like, listen, we need help. We admit we cannot fix this problem. Mexico sucks at doing that. The president says like, we can handle it, but they're not handling it. They need to understand, like, they're putting themselves at risk. And going back to the China thing, they are again at risk economically. So they kind of have two problems to deal with here at once. So that's kind of my little final thing to add on this. But
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think I have a question though in how we can actually stop these drug cartels.
Yeah.
My final question is, do we need an international response? Do we need to send troops in, or do we send or create a new UN peacekeeping mission in Latin America?
Ooh, well, for UN peacekeepers to go in, there have to be a lot more killings. Um, Unfortunately, because the UN does not like to first off get involved, and I don't think the cartels would even care if they were there. They would find a way to get around them, kill them. And you know how the EU, the peacekeepers are. They can't fire unless fired upon.
Right.
So, if the cartel shows up and everyone starts firing at them and they have to wait there, they're out of luck, they're already behind. I personally think economics and a, a special forces response is in hands because what we learn from special forces is that we're really, really good. They're really good at cutting the heads off of networks and getting. I mean, we destroyed ISIS, we destroyed Al Qaeda, we destroyed, almost destroyed Al Shabaab. We're getting there with what's the other one in Africa? It's with an H.
Uh, as no,
Hezbollah, maybe.
is it?
I think it's Hezbollah. I think it is.
I
There is one
forgot.
that starts with an H, but we're getting there. We're really good at cutting the heads and destroying networks. But what we're not good at is what happens after the diplomacy, the
Yep.
development. We need to first off, when we destroy these cartels, if we do that, not force democracy on these countries because nobody likes that anymore. Let them be who they want to be.
Democracy.
Yeah, I mean
Forced
that's
democracy.
what we
That's
did. We
funny.
tried to force it on Afghanistan and Iraq, and how Taliban controls Afghanistan and Iraq. Who knows what's going on there? I mean, it's just a craziness. But we could do that and then just invest in them. Just tell them, hey, now that the cartels are gone, here's some money. Here's some things what we want to see. Infrastructure, homes, jobs, trade deals, whatever it is. And so the special forces can do the military a lot without having, secretly, privately, without having too much of a stress on hurting civilians, while also doing the post stuff like investing.
Right. And another post thing we can do is, as an international community, we push for more youth involvement in politics in these countries. We don't know who is corrupt and who is not. If we develop a way where we can restructure some of the governments in Latin America to include more educated youth, because youth are less prone to being corrupt. Youth are because they're more well educated. They understand more of the risks compared to people who already have been in office for too long. So I also want to see some more youth involvement after the cartel has left or has been destroyed in these countries as well.
Yeah.
So
And not just like youth as in, 16, 17, 18-year olds, something like in the 10, 11, 12 range too, because not that they need to be involved in government, but they need to be involved in their
serve as like
communities.
an advocate.
Yeah, they need to be there involved in their communities, helping out with community service, working directly with the school to help out in community service or after school activities, study abroads. So important. A study abroad is so important for people who are going from a corrupt developing country to a developed country because then they get to see what life's like.
And what it could
They
be.
want it. They want it so bad. And so that's extremely important because a lot of the things that happened, um, what was it in China when the president in 1971 went to see Nixon and they videoed it and they went back to China and they're like, "Do you people have refrigerators?"
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah, I remember
the
that. Now
professor
I
was
know it.
talking about that.
I know
They
exactly
have
what you're talking.
refrigerators. These people have air conditioning. They have 3 meals a day. Everyone has a car. They live in these nice houses.
And we kind
They
of
have
need that
TVs.
realization again on like what is life like without the cartel.
Yeah,
They need to have this like light bulb moment.
yeah. And that will be huge for the youth if you can send them out abroad. India had a big realization on that too, and that's why India is becoming one of the biggest economies in the world. They're growing at such exponential rates. So that could be a big thing. Youth engagement, studying abroad, education. That's so huge. And the United States, again, they need the help. The EU, they need the help in providing funding for these. They don't need to make the programs. They just need to provide funding for
Right.
them, or help provide the funding, loans, whatever it is. So,
Yep.
be interesting to
I think
see.
that kind of wraps up everything, right?
Yeah,
I don't have much else to say. I think we try to bank on or I'll target every single aspect of what it would be like without the cartel. I think
yeah,
we successfully did that.
yeah.
If there's anything else you want to add, any final comments, or if not, no.
No, I got nothing else. Just, again, this is another thing. Please do your research because this is not talked about enough, I think, on the international community. And I don't think our government is doing enough to kind of coordinate responses worldwide.
Besides provide like surveillance systems and
What, yeah,
other like military aircraft and software, but
whatever that
we always
does.
do
I
that.
mean,
We
come
always
on.
just send weapons and like, well, they already have our weapons. They can figure it out.
Yeah, which
Well,
is
we need
ridiculous.
less of that and more of funding,
More policy.
more policy.
Yeah, be super important.
But
Hopefully, our youth and our young adults can come into power and change a lot of what's going on because there's just such a lack of action in this
right,
world right now. So,
agreed.
yeah,
But that wraps up this week's topic of the week. Stay tuned for more latest global developments and topic of the week. Thank you all for listening, and see you all in the next one.
have a good one.